So welcome to Priestessing the Priestesses, episode 12. I am Kohenet Annie Matan, and I'm here with my co-host, Kohenet Dvorah Grenn. And we have three Kohanot today. We have Kohenet Ketzirah Lesser, our special guest today. And Ketzirah and I were ordained in the same class. We are Rishonot, the first class of ordained Kohanot in the Kohenet Hebrew Priestess Training Institute. Dvorah predates us. She actually helped create the institute. She's an honored elder. So we have three elders in the Kohenet community, which is pretty exciting, and three very different types of priestesses. And so I think one of the things that I'm excited to talk about today is different forms of priestessing. And it's particularly, I was just saying to Ketzirah when we were talking about what should we talk about today, I was saying, well, you know, Ketzirah and I were in the same class, and she priestesses in everything she does. And so, you know, Ketzirah, we'd love to hear about what it means to be a corporate priestess, and what it means to bring your priestessing into the political realm and into the arts work that you do, and the sacred, you know, how you engage with the sacred and supporting the Kohenet community. You don't have to speak to all those things. I want to name that, like, that's like a superficial overview of the ways that Ketzirah shows up as a priestess in the world. And yeah, and like, what's that like? And how do you priestess yourself through all of that? Yes, and maybe Dvorah and I can speak to the contrast, like the ways that we are priestessing. And it feels like we are sort of snapshots of different types of Kohanot.
Right, true.
I'm so excited to be here with both of you. You're two of my favorite people. So I'm thrilled to just honestly get a chance to chat. Any excuse to hang out with you guys for like a half hour is awesome.
Precious time. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. So, Ketzirah, can you tell us, what does it mean to be a corporate priestess?
Yeah. So, like you said, Annie, to outside observers, what I do seems really disparate, and like I'm doing all these things all over the place. And I finally found a way to sort of boil it down for myself in some clarity. And my simplest version is I am a corporate priestess and a maker and teacher of the sacred arts. So pretty much everything I do falls into those buckets. And yeah, there's this whole idea that, like, to be a full-time priestess, your work has to look like priestess work to somebody else, right? So you're counseling, you're leading ritual, you're doing these other things. And I firmly believe there's no such thing as a part-time priestess. And so for me, it shows up differently, and it's been, and again, Annie, like you said, we were cohort mates, and so this is not new for me being in the corporate world. I've just made more peace with it than I had 15 years ago. And so, yeah, being a corporate priestess for me shifted how I show up in those environments, a more conscious understanding that I'm there not only to do the job that they're paying me to do, but I'm also there to model a different style of leadership, because I am generally in a leadership capacity in my job. And without ever crossing those careful lines, I don't need to talk theology to model compassion, to model kindness, to model power with, even if officially you're in a power over kind of a situation, right? Like in it's a very hierarchical world. Right. And so you may officially report to me, and I might officially be able to tell you what you have to do, which I'm a control freak, so I love. But with that, also knowing that I believe in power with and collaborative, and that while the buck may stop with me because it is a capitalist society we're currently living in, the responsibility also does too, right? So what does responsible leadership look like in a corporate environment? and how do I show up for folks, not just in the work itself, but in a more human way? So there's a lot of those pieces. Basically, how do I be the opposite of 80% of like the corporate management I've encountered?
And I mean, showing up there that way, you're a possibility model. You're showing people how they can be too. And when they don't have to be alone in it, right? Like you show up and own it, and then someone else goes, oh, I could do that too. And so you're really affecting change just by doing what you do and bringing your sensibility to the work that you do.
And I've actually seen it in action, which has been so interesting in large and small ways. And one of my favorites was quite a few years ago now, was an executive creative director. I work in marketing and communications at advertising agencies. And he was notorious for having no respect for outside life. Like your only passion is apparently communications and advertising, and anything else he had zero respect for. And he came barreling up to my desk one day, and I didn't know him well yet. Like we became very good friends later, but like I didn't know him well. And he came up and he looked at me and goes, I need you in New York this weekend. I live in DC. And I looked at him, and this isn't like, there are a lot of routes I could have taken, right? The simple one was, okay, fine, like whatever. And I looked at him and I ended up going, okay, I'm going to tell you what I have scheduled this weekend. I can cancel, like I can reschedule. This is my job. This is what pays my bills. So I can reschedule. But then once I tell you, tell me if you really need me in New York this weekend, or can I be there at 9 a.m. Monday morning? And I mean, so much anger, the fact that I didn't just say yes, like it was an instant response. And he's like, oh, fine. And so I was like, okay, great. I'm meeting with a couple whose wedding I'm officiating. Whatever he thought I was going to say, that was not on the list, like at all, like was not anywhere in the consideration set. He had no idea how to handle that moment. And he spluttered and then went, I'll see you Monday morning. And then we talked a lot, like it became this whole thing. And it was, again, we never had to get into my theology or any of that, but just that like, wait, you do what when you're not here? And it just, he became one of the ones seeing even the incremental change in his respect levels for other people and what they did outside of work, and like that possibility that it actually makes you better at the job you're being paid for.
Exactly.
Honestly, it never crossed his mind.
Right.
So yeah, it was, again, one of many over the years.
You are part of a paradigm shift, as I think we all are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's how it happens often, right? In those moments, those small one-on-one moments that aren't so small. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that's the big piece of it. And I work in an industry that isn't known for its values, that isn't that shapes reality. Yeah. We've actually been talking about this, some of us recently, a lot, that our job is to literally influence your belief system. Mm-hmm. Usually to convince you to buy some stuff you don't need.
And you really want to make sure that, like for us, it's like, I want to make sure that there are Ketzirahs in that world, that we have some light side folks, pardon the binary, but folks who are ensconced in the values that, if you have the magical power to influence our thinking and beliefs, we want you to be influencing our thinking and beliefs for things that are going to serve us, mm-hmm. Rather than things that might hurt us.
Right.
Right. And sometimes I still have to sell you dog food, but I actually don't generally work on products anymore. It was a conscious choice about 5 years ago now that I had an opportunity dropped in my lap and allowed me to shift away into things that are focused on the public good primarily, which is amazing. But it's also, there's a very interesting conscious shift happening within the industry where 10 years ago, you didn't question what you were being asked to sell.
Right.
And now there's an active movement around, hold up, our job is to shift reality, maybe we should be thinking about the reality we're shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And again, sometimes it's like, these crackers are delicious, eat the crackers. But, you know, probably not going to hurt anybody with the crackers. But yeah, there is a lot. And it's been an interesting challenge over the years of aligning my values and how I show up, especially in an advertising agency world where you don't get to pick your clients normally.
Right.
You know, you are told you're working on this client now. And it can be really hard when you land in that room and you're like, I can't work on this client. Like, how do I work on this client is actually often the other question. And like, how do I navigate this and still go home and feeling okay about myself? And sometimes you do what I did, which is say, there's a whole category of clients that I choose not to work on anymore, which put my job at risk. And I had quite a few people telling me not to do that I was limiting myself. And I'm like,
Yep.
I'm not saying there couldn't be a situation where within that category, there was something that felt like a great choice, but overall, I have a lot of experience in that category now, and I don't feel good about working there.
Right.
And yeah, that fear, like people reflecting to you, oh, well, you're limiting yourself. Well, yes, I am. I'm creating a boundary and a container in which I can operate effectively and safely and at highest capacity. And sometimes we have to put those limits there. Otherwise, we're just being depleted in a variety of directions.
And we have to look at ourselves in the mirror every day.
Yes, absolutely.
Be in public relations, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Public relations, did you say, Dvorah?
Did. But I'd love to come back to self-care, which you were raising at the beginning, Annie, and yes, and so with everything that you're holding, which is the role of course, full-time priestess, but both corporate and outside, and artist, and a weaver, and craft maker, and many other things, which I will let you name rather than name. When and how do you find time? And time and whatever else, energy even sometimes I find, for self-care?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think like a lot of folks, I'm probably not doing, it's a challenge, always. I think one of the things that has been my bedrock, and both of you know the big project I've been working on at my corporate priestess life for the last 4 years, that's just wrapping up. And I actually pitched it to a conference to talk about this, is how my Mussar practice got me through one of the most complicated, politicized, stressful things I've ever dealt with in my life, like that whole thing. And so,
can you take a moment to explain what Mussar is for folks who aren't familiar with it?
Yes, please. So Mussar is I love you guys so much.
These are Ketzirahs cards.
Well, you're talking about illuminated awareness, so I thought I'd start with that one.
So short version, Mussar is a roughly 1,000-year-old Jewish spiritual practice. The word translates literally as ethics, which makes it super boring sounding, which I think is one of the many ways to scare people away. Like, let's make this sound really boring. And it's an understanding, at least my understanding of it, is that the purpose of our life is to explore our soul's unique curriculum. Right? That we're all here, and in each lifetime, our soul has a curriculum. Some theories of we agreed to it and we forgot, that whole the midrash of being tapped on the lip and by an angel right before you're born, and you forget everything that you learned in utero or prior, because none of us would choose the challenges we had in real time. Nobody would do it. And so this idea that there's a soul curriculum and living them out is a way of grappling with the mitzvah, the sacred connective action of you shall be holy, right? So we're charged in the Torah, you shall be holy because your God, goddess is holy. And then you're like, how do I do that? And so Mussar is sort of a system of like, what does it mean to frankly be a better person, but not just for your own benefit. So it's a little different than some of the others that are all about your personal zen in a lot of ways. The whole point of Mussar is to be a better person, to become more holy, to be better within the world. And unlike some of the other Eastern systems that are all about like you achieve, we'll do like Zen, literally, Zen, you don't actually get to stop. It's a little exhausting some days. But the idea is also that when you will plateau and you can give yourself a rest, but then you're going to be confronted with another really difficult choice. And that's how you find out where you are in your spiritual growth. And it's okay if one day you're like, I do not have the energy to be a better person today. I just don't. I'm not doing it. And if another day you're like, look at that, I just became a better person. I made the harder choice on that front, and I didn't even know I was going to pull that off today. That's amazing. Go me. So, and this, sorry, trying to do this as fast as I can, but you know I love talking about it. There's a series of soul traits. There are very long versions of different lists. And so that's what you start working with. You don't have to invent how do I feel necessarily. There are many, many guideposts and maps along the way for different soul traits, and then how they affect your behavior. And that's the other kicker to the whole thing, is it, again, is not just how you're feeling inside, is that it is actually changing your behavior along the way. And it works. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it works. So it's been a huge piece for me.
Yeah, so this is one of the things, and what's cool is you've been doing it for yourself, like you sort of delved into it for yourself, and now you're teaching it. You're making cards, you're teaching workshops and classes. Are those open? Are those offerings for specific communities? Or are they open to anyone?
So they have been open. They've been mostly, I've leveled out for a couple of months here just because I needed a break, self-care, give myself a little time. I am planning on starting up the open ones again, and they usually are through Kohenet community, but they're open to the public. So they're on Shabbat for Saturday afternoons, usually after Kohenet services. Everyone takes a couple hours off, and then we spend about an hour or so talking about the soul trait for the month based on the system that I've been co-creating with a whole bunch of other folks. Because I like systems.
Right. Oh, speaking of liking systems, it feels important to name that you just launched a library of sacred resources. Can you tell us the name of that and how people can find those resources?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So my brand, if you will, is Devotage. I don't know why I air quoted it. It's my brand, like it's a thing.
Like you're in branding. Why are you air quoting?
I don't know why I didn't. So Devotage Sacred Arts is the name that I work under mostly. And within that, I just launched the Cosmic Reference Library. And Annie, I'm remembering, I think you were one of the first people that I ever used the concept of Cosmic Reference Librarian with many, many years ago. I have to credit a teacher of mine a while back, post Kohenet. I did a year-long program, and one of the questions that she asked us in it was, what is your cosmic origin? Mm-hmm. And after cussing for like 20 minutes about this whole question, which is my response to anything that challenges me spiritually, is just to swear for like 10 minutes. I actually had like a real revelation, and this idea of this cosmic reference library, which is my happy place, my home, my origin, my starting point. And I had no idea what it meant or what to do with it, but it's been very much like a personal North Star ever since. And so the Cosmic Reference Library is a digital place, but it is also an astral temple. Only one other person so far has been fully invited into the astral temple part, and that's my library assistant. And we're moving about 20 years worth of writing and content into this digital platform.
And where does the writing and content come from? Where have you collected that from? Who are the authors?
Me, mostly.
Oh, wow.
No, it's mostly my own writing and content. I am going to hopefully be bringing some other voices in fairly in the next year or so, assuming funding. But yeah, it's mostly, I process through writing a lot, and I'm very introverted despite my outgoing behaviors. So like writing and blogging especially has been something I've been doing for 25 years now. And it's how I found Kohenet. It's how I found Jewish communities, you know, and so I just put out things I was thinking, and I refined them over time. And so, and then a lot of the other pieces are people in especially Kohenet community will say, does anyone have resources on what this plant means in Judaism? And my usual answer is, hold please. And if I have time, because this is what I do for fun, I comb through the resources I have. I have a very large book collection, both digital and print, as well as tons of other digitized resources. So things are at my fingertips very quickly. And I'll put a source sheet together of primary sources on everything from like owls. One was owls. Somebody wanted owls. To lulav and etrog. And pulling together very much from a progressive and magical perspective, right? You can get the straight answer anyway. You can get like the very normative answer anywhere.
Yeah, and you saying progressive and magical, I feel like it's important to name that. So for those who weren't listening carefully, they might have missed that you just said Jewish, not Jewish. That was a TCH, not an SH. And that Ketzirah, before you were a Kohenet, you were a practicing celebrant in a pagan community, right? Or actually, I want to check, like, tell me the right language. I don't want to misname it.
No, here's the thing. I'm not pagan. I briefly did study Wicca, discovered that Anglo-Celtic gods don't talk to me because I'm Jewish. They really wanted no part of this Russian, Hungarian, Lithuanian chick, like no part of me. And at the time, the magical community that I was a part of, they're still my family, and they actually kicked me back into Judaism. They're like, don't you have some ancient mystical tradition you can study? Like, go do it.
Right.
And then they supported me through that, right? Like, it was amazing. And there is an ancient Dvorah, I think I met you there probably, is the Jewitry Yahoo list that was like so old, but I've met so many amazing people over the years through it. So yeah, it's magical Judaism, and now there's like scholarly study of it. It's okay to study it. So we have a lot more knowledge.
And I just want to bring in, you mentioned a listserv, the Asherah list, which was also a combination of scholarly and those who were practitioners. I just want to, there's so much more to say. We're obviously going to have to do this again because we only have about 10 more minutes, but I'm just reminded when you talk about pre-Kohenet Institute times that that you also were a tremendous pioneer with one shul and bringing us services, the ability to worship online long before thing, right?
Hilarious. So post Kohenet, somewhere in my Kohenet land, it's since Annie and I have been doing this for have been in that world for 15 years now.
15 years, almost. It was started in 2006.
Right.
Yep. So we're getting there. Yeah, so I thought, because it's the thing you're supposed to do, that I wanted, that's a real air quote, appropriate air quote. I thought I was heading towards a pulpit for some time. I really saw myself as a pulpit priestess. I do enjoy leading ritual. I like teaching ritual design more than I like leading the ritual, because then I can tell you're doing it wrong, and that's more fun for me. But yeah, one shul was amazing, and it's so funny. I have to admit, it's very funny for me now. Whenever it's like, oh, we're doing Zoom services, I'm like, good for you.
Yeah.
Just saying.
When did you start that?
So that was started by still a good friend of mine, Patrick Olive, who was not a rabbi back in the day. He was like the punk rock rebel. It's really funny now that he is a rabbi. And they actually, he and his other somebody else who was part of that world at the very beginning, contacted me right as they were about to launch One Shul. And we started talking and all of this, and they're like, what do you think? I'm like, okay. So I was there day one, basically, but I always have to give Patrick, because he was the smart mind behind the starting of it. And then I very much became the face of it, and then was the executive director for the last couple of years.
Right.
And when did that begin? Do you remember?
Rough.
Oh Lord, 2009, I think. I mean, it was definitely early, and maybe later than that. I'm trying to remember if it was before or after, like smicha, like I can't quite remember, before or after ordination. So
Remember that it was the first Shabbat service I ever heard of being online. Yeah. So I just want to give a shout out to that. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my early like nom de plumes was Wired Witch, which I've never like. That was one of my very early ones, and I keep trying to shed it, but I'm not physically capable.
So I love that, like, you've managed to talk your way around. You're like, well, I don't self-care, I really need to work on it, but you've managed to talk about these things that bring you joy, and that's really an important form of self-care. And the cosmic reference library, for sure, like that's a huge one, and Mussar. And it's interesting that a lot of the things that bring you joy are things that you put out into the world. And you know, I know we used to sit when we were studying in Kohenet, and I would sit and crochet, and you would sit and cross stitch and embroider. And now and we were, before we came online, we were talking about the Netivot Oracle deck, the Et At Netivot Wisdom Oracle deck. Did I get it right? Yes, great. That Ketzirah created, that is sold out of its first run, and maybe next year. So, you know, folks who are interested in it, please tap Ketzirah so she'll know the interest is there, and that it'll be easy to sell and easy to launch for those of us who want more in the world. And recently, pretty recently, you have been creating, I feel like it's political art. It's sacred political art for pandemic times. So can you use that? Yay! Tell us, what is this creature?
So this little thing, this is Gashi. I must introduce Gashi properly, or Gashi will be very upset with me. Yes, all right, Gashi, I need you to sit over here. This is very hard just holding you there, so sit here. So, yeah, beginning of the pandemic, I'd been working on things that were much more in the style that I was very committed to working in, making embroidered amulets, talismans, things like that, and was working on one that I someday will finish. But I actually couldn't find joy in it. It felt like a burden. It didn't feel like it was resourcing me. It didn't feel relevant, frankly. And so I was really trying to think about what is a Jewish response to plague and pandemic, oppression, fear, violence, like all the things that have been 2020, right? Like all the things that have been this year. And I suddenly realized, like immediately went, oh, the golem. Right. And I started thinking about the myths of these created beings that are created in an acceptable form of Jewish magic, right? In theory, one has to be hella holy to do it. Mine are not clay, because I probably have too much whiskey in my system on any given week to like make a clay one. And I was like, okay, I wonder if I could do this. And I don't work with clay generally. So I was like, how do I do this out of fabric? So I had brown felt, because I had this idea years ago, but I didn't do it, but I bought the felt. And so I drew, and I don't hand draw terribly well. It's a lot of computer assistance in my designs. But I started drawing this design, and it was adorable. I was quite pleased with myself.
Really?
And so I started making this little one first. And the process that I went through to make this one is a bit different than I make the other ones, because it would probably take 6 months to make like 3 if I did it the same way for all of them. Right. But I realized, and it was a mistake, and now it's become a choice. So I call this one the gingerbread style, because when I started doing the chain stitching, I was like, it looks like frosting. And then I decided that was fabulous. And so I have 2 styles I make. One are cookies, and they're like this, and they all have a cute little bum. They all have a bum. And they also all have a sigil, so a power symbol that is made out of Hebrew letters, the sort of shapes, just the raw shapes of Hebrew letters broken down into their most basic element. And they are the final lines of Psalm 33. And Psalm 33 has historically been used in Jewish culture to ward off plague and pandemic.
Right.
Pandemic wasn't a word we had when they started that, but plague and epidemic. And so these became part of what I was doing. And to my surprise, the minute I posted a photo of Gashi here, people are like, gimme.
I need, right.
Right. And then I did a really silly thing is I made stickers because I am a 12-year-old girl from the 80s at heart still. And like, so I made a sticker, and my husband did a thing that is happens a lot in our marriage, where he asks me a question that sparks a whole new thing. And he goes, could you make a glitter golem though? And same reaction as I cussed at him for a minute, because that's my response to any spiritual growth, is to swear. And then I started researching glitter fabric and the glitter golem. And I actually call them golem-et, with a little slash in between before the ET in English. Because if folks don't know, I know you two know, but Hebrew is a gendered language, a binary gendered language. And so you have to make a choice. So golem assumes masculine. And it was instantly aware to me. I was like, these dudes are non-binary. Let's not go gender here. So I didn't use the movement lately around non-binary Hebrew, because I didn't feel like enough people would even know. So when I write it, it's golem, small pause, et. And so trying to create a bit of a new modern mythology as well around these little creatures and what they're all about. And yeah, I mean, you said it, like making them is self-care for me. Like it is joyful, it's wonderful, and I'll keep doing it as long as like I am like loving it.
You're also converting something that's been regarded as just scary, nightmarish, and even a demon into a positive force, for protection and even maybe change. And I recognize that, the demonization from, of course, the work with Lilith, but also from the little I know about the golem. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And cuddly, right? Like
they are. He's a very squishy, very good listener, and they are very good dancers. They're a little into disco. We're still working on that.
Right. And this is what place you brought us, self-care. I was saying before we started recording, of having a group of them dancing at the disco on Instagram. And it was definitely a highlight the day I saw and heard that.
It's pretty darn funny. And I will also acknowledge my husband started that.
Oh, go Art. That's great. So I love that, the answer really that to the question about how do you priestess yourself when you're doing all of these things in the world is you figure out what brings you joy and you do that. And we are just so fortunate. I mean, I know you're also a super introvert. So, there's also, you have to carve out, you talked about time to just be by yourself and not be producing anything. And how useful for the rest of us that a lot of the things that bring you joy are also really bringing us joy and bringing us access to you're transforming the business world that you work in by showing up with your priestessing values. You're offering access to magical and Jewish wisdom with your cosmic reference librarianness. And you've brought us amulets and altars, and now what is the plural for a golem-et?
So as much as it's driving a few folks insane right now, I actually consider it like fish and fish. To me, the plural of golem-et is golem-et.
Great. So you have brought us many golem-et. And do you have a new minion on the way yet, or are you taking a break?
In process, I was going to take a little break, but realized right now, I personally probably need to be working on these. I have another project that I want to get back to, but there is another one on the way inside. And let me see, here we go. This one is, we'll see what happens with this one.
Oh.
What? That's amazing. That's a first. Flowers? Is that flowers? Wow.
It is. There is a lot of felt is fascinating lately. There's some stuff they're doing with felt that's amazing.
Cool.
And I owe my sister actually, who is not into any of this, actually, she saw one of the little tiny ones I've done and was like, me? So I have to make her one. And I want one other thing, I know we need to wrap up, but it's around Golem. Golem in general and Golemet is, Golem have been very much appropriated into just pop culture, often being stripped of their Jewishness. Like things like the Simpsons show, they were still Jewishly rooted, which was at least there. But I have an 11-year-old nephew through my sister who only knew a golem as a thing from the video game Minecraft.
Right.
And when I told him that it's a Jewish thing, he told me I was lying. And so like he has actually the biggest glitter golem I've ever made. He wanted a glitter one. And he now hands out glitter golem stickers to his friends.
And educate them. Yeah.
It was a way for this 11-year-old boy to actually connect in to his, like, looking at his video game differently now as well, like knowing that this somehow like is actually connected to his Jewishness. Yeah. So that was like an amazing thing to me to have my nephew be super excited and really want one, and like he really loves it apparently. So which is amazing.
That's great.
Awesome.
Glad you could make time to come today and that we had a chance to at least start this conversation. There's much more to be said, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, Ketzirah. And it's always a pleasure to get to hang out with you, Dvorah. And people can find, I'll tag Ketzirah so if you're watching this, there should be a tag so that you can find any of the three of us. And maybe I'll include, I don't know, you can tell me what you want me to include if we want to send people to find you, probably Instagram or.
Yeah, Instagram or the website. Both
Great.
are great. So amazing. I love you both. And I am so grateful to have, it's sad that I need like an excuse like this to hang out with my friends, but I actually do. So I appreciate it a lot.
Yes, I appreciate it too. Thank you so much for being here. Wishing everyone, so we're recording this on Friday. It's almost 5. It's just after 5 Eastern. And Dvorah is on the West Coast, recording Friday afternoon. So, you know, we like to wish everyone, even though it's not likely to be up before Shabbat, we like to wish people, you know, a Shabbat Shalom and a lovely weekend. Yeah, and any other closing words from you folks?
I am content and complete. It was wonderful. Thanks and blessings.
Blessings.